Hello, and thank you for joining us for our webinar today, Unplug Your Fax Machines. Now, as we begin, you're going to have the opportunity to enter questions in. If you look at your screen, below the slides, there's a tab that says Q&A, and you can enter in your questions there, and at the end of our presentation, we'll have time to address your questions. We'll also have a demonstration in the presentation as well. So our topic today is unplugging your fax machines. My name's Tim Dubes. I'm a product manager with J2. And as we begin talking about this, you can see on our tablet screen there, we have three of the fellows from one of my favorite movies, Office Space, doing some unkind damage to another office machine. So we're going to suggest today that instead of taking a baseball bat to your fax machine, perhaps a kinder, gentler way may just be to unplug it and replace it with other technology. So before we talk about unplugging it, we should really review the last 12 months. First, as we get into this, there's my picture, and as I said, I work with J2 on the marketing team. Unplugging your fax machine. It's been a tough year for the last 12 months for fax machines. I'll do a quick review of the top 3 news stories that's related to fax. Fax doesn't get into the news much lately, but when it does, it seems to make an impression. The first one, this is a fellow who plays for the NFL, and I suppose there have been other stories about the NFL that have been a little bit more important recently. But at the beginning of last year, this fellow, Elvis Dummerville, he was defensive end for the Denver Broncos. He had a $12 million contract clause with the Denver Broncos. Denver Broncos had a lot of other players they wanted to sign, and they were offering him an $8 million contract instead. Well, his agent and he had to a certain time frame to accept this. $8 million is a lot of money. So there was back and forth. There was a 1 p.m. Mountain Time deadline to either accept the deal, and the two sides had really reached a verbal agreement about a half hour before this deadline imposed by the NFL. The only problem was Dummerville's agent allegedly failed to send the fax through on time. So the Denver Broncos front office are kind of in a bind. So about a minute before that deadline, the team was forced to waive him, so that rather than being stuck paying the entire $12 million, they decided to waive him, and there's Elvis Dummerville without his $8 million contract because they couldn't successfully send a fax. Now, the Denver Broncos front office, apparently, again, said one of the team's fax machines was on the fritz, and so they were trying to get this thing, fax machine working, and they attempted to get the agent to send the document through another channel, whether they could fax it to a local office max or something along those lines. All those efforts were in vain. The deadline came, and as basically the team source told the agent, you made a colossal mistake. Now, don't feel too bad for Elvis. He got his $8 million from the Baltimore Ravens. I'd suggest instead you feel bad for Marty Majid, who was, and I emphasize was, his agent. So he was the one who lost his job on this and has one less client right now. So that was the number 3 story about fax in the news. The second one, and you may not have heard of this one, but this was a story about a fax that could cost a small business owner up to $48 million. So this is a small business in Minnesota, and they were facing a $48 million class action lawsuit because they broadcast fax advertisements. Think of this as the spam of the fax world. And so this company, and the fellow's name was Doug Wahlberg, he publishes legal directories. And he was first sued in 2007 by this attorney. Now, Wahlberg said this attorney agreed to receive faxes and then turned around and sued him for violating an FCC rule. And this ruling required faxes to have an opt-out clause, similar to emails. And these clauses should include instructions for unsubscribing to broadcast fax. Wahlberg said, it just doesn't seem right to be sued by a guy who requested the fax, but that's the situation. There are requirements on fax transmissions just as there are in email transmissions. And he said it's been a little hard to concentrate with this fine hanging over his head. And as I said, it was up to the potential fines range from $16 million up to $48 million. It's a pretty high price for a small publisher in Minnesota that does about $1 million in sales annually. Now the number one fax story, and this is one from last year that I'm sure you're familiar with. North Korea threatened war against South Korea, and they did it via fax. So here's the story. This was in December. Kim Jong-un threatened to attack South Korea without any notice, and by the way, we tend to think of a fax as actually being noticed, but he said that in his printed out fax that he sent to South Korea's National Security Council in Seoul. The fax made reference to demonstrations in which effigies of Kim Jong-il, who was Kim Jong-un's father, they were being burnt in Seoul on the anniversary of his death. And that was kind of aggravating there for the North Korea. So South Korea received this fax and kind of reacted firmly to it, said that they would when a fax says that they're going to mercilessly attack without notice, you kind of take that seriously, and they sent a fax back that promised resolute punishment to any attack by the North. So that's fax in the last year, and when it gets publicity from the media. Well, what about you? What do you think of when you think of the humble fax machine? If I say fax machine to you, what comes to mind? Well, maybe you think of it as a necessary evil. It's something you have to deal with, that you need to have for documents that need to be signed. It seems kind of strange in this age of multifunction devices and networked scanners that you'd have to have a dedicated machine for faxes, but we see it. When we visit offices, and these are small offices up to the largest Fortune 500 companies, you'll still see fax machines sitting in department copy offices. And wherever there seems to be that departmental printer or copy machine, there's a fax machine sitting right next to it. Or maybe you're one of those people who say, hey, I remember using one of those, and now whenever I have to send a fax, we just kind of run over to Kinko's or somebody like that, and we send a fax. To the technology elite, sending a fax seems really arcane, and it can be, unless in business, until you have to exchange documents. In our personal lives, if you have to rent an apartment, buy a house, or conduct some other financial transaction, that's when you go off and you try to find this fax machine. Maybe your action is, why do I still have to use this? Why can't I email this? Well, you can ask Elvis Dumervil in that situation. You remember the Broncos player. You might question, well, why didn't his agent just send an email with this? Well, essentially, that would have been the same as their conversation they had on the phone that said, yep, we have an agreement. It wasn't binding. And when you're talking about a $12 million contract versus an $8 million contract versus zero, you're talking some pretty large numbers here. You want to follow all the guidelines, and with the NFL, they don't consider it an official document unless they have it in writing with the signature on it. That's going to require either a messenger document or a fax. And that's why there is certainly a time and place for documents and when you may want to email documents as an attachment. But for many other cases, it's going to require, if not a fax machine, the ability to fax. And probably I'll leave this in the last words here, and we'll give that to Michael Scott from the television show The Office. As you know, he was the manager of one of the Dunder Mifflin offices, and he said, and I quote, fax, why don't you just send it over on a dinosaur? So in addition to these 12 months of kind of obscure and not very good news about fax machines, we can see that overall, and if you think about the way your perceptions of fax machines are, they kind of suffer a little bit from a lack of respect. So why still have a fax machine at all? Well, I've kind of alluded to this in several of these. There's a lot of legitimate reasons for faxing, and hence that's why people tend to use the fax machine. The most obvious one, when a document needs a signature, when you have to put pen to paper on this. This is not an email type issue. When you're compelled to. Right, this is always a good reason. When there are compliance issues, when there are regulations, when there are guidelines, when there needs to be a proof of delivery. An email and showing somebody a copy of email just doesn't cut it. What you get with faxing is you get a timestamp that transaction actually took place. And you get that at both ends with that fax ID, that the transmission was both sent and received. You get that written record of proof. And then the last reason, and this might be one you don't think of, but it's apparent. That's the way you've always done things. Why do you send a fax? Because with court documents, that's the way it's always been done. If you have affidavits, maybe that's the way it's always been done in your organization. These are all good reasons, and they're not to simply just be dismissed out of hand. A lot of people are still using fax machines, and this is a study done by the NPD group. There were 17 million active fax machines in the U.S. in 2012. And that's, in the last year, 350,000 new fax machines were purchased, and that's in the U.S. again, in 1 year alone. So the fax machine is still out there. And yes, we are serious on here. Now, there's some issues with this, and I wanted to make you aware because sometimes you might think of fax machines and different ages of fax machines. I wanted to show you. I was out this morning on the Office Depot website. You can still get your paper, the thermographic paper, if we remember these, the paper that curls, although this paper claims that it has anti-curl properties in the thermographics of it. You still can buy those rolls that fit into your fax machine so that you can do thermographic faxing. So it's out there, 17 million plus fax machines today. Well, there are drawbacks to fax machines, obviously, and not just to the thermographic fax machines, but to plain paper fax machines as well. Okay, one of the big ones is they're immobile. And this is something you may be used to in the department or in the office that you work at, and that is you'll see people waiting around to use a fax machine. You've got to leave your desk, walk over to the fax machine. Hopefully no one else is using it. You put it in. Hopefully that line is not busy, and then you got to make sure all the pages go through, that pages don't do double feeds, things like that. Now, it may not be a huge problem for you, and it's 5-10 minutes out of your day, but this idea of immobility, the only place you're going to be able to send that fax is where that machine is. And as our friend here shows in the photo, it's kind of tough to take that with you to the local coffee shop. It's really important, and not to make light of it in this photo, but I'll give you an example from my own life. I was purchasing a home in Las Vegas a couple of years ago when they were virtually giving away homes in Las Vegas, so I thought I would get myself one. The problem was with these wonderful prices in Las Vegas, homes were going left and right, and there were offers and offers and offers. Now, all told, it took us about 6 months to purchase that home in Las Vegas, and that was because there were multiple offers on most of them. And if you're familiar with the real estate industry, they don't take emails. Now, on the television shows, they may show you where they're negotiating deals for all cash, and people are doing it over the telephone, and the deal's done. Those deals aren't done without signed documents, and signed documents require a fax. So I travel quite a bit in business, and so I was going all over the country. My wife is a nurse here in Los Angeles. She doesn't travel as much as I do. And, of course, our real estate agent was in Las Vegas. All of these documents required all three of us to have signatures on them for every time we wanted to make an offer on a house. Very difficult to do with the multiple fax machines. We'll talk about how that we did that in a little bit here. But if you can imagine, if we had to do this with traditional fax machines, we do not have a fax machine at my house. So my wife, either if she was at work or if she was at home would have to go and find a fax machine. We do have a Staples. It's about a half-mile from our house, so I guess we could have done that. Had her sign the document, figure out where I was on the road, fax it to that hotel. I would sign the document, use that same hotel fax machine, fax it back to our real estate agent who would sign that, who would ultimately fax it on. A lot of steps and not very convenient. So immobility is a real big problem. And just like this case that I gave you from my personal life, in business, faxes sometimes need to be routed around for different people, either to sign, to view, to take some action on. Faxes tend to be transactional now. They represent a purchase, they represent an offer, they represent a legal commitment, a legal document. Multiple people may need to look at these documents. And right now with the fax machine, it's a manual kind of time-consuming process. You receive the paper fax, you make a copy, you send it around to different people. You have a paper-based workflow. That's kind of a drawback. There's also security issues. You know, faxes are secure in transmission, and this is one of the other good things about faxes. It's an analog transmission. This is not something that's going to be subject to, such as an email, where you can get bugs and you have different security issues with that. An analog phone line transmission is a real good way to have a secure transmission for that document. The problem is when it's received, it's only secure if you get to that first. In the healthcare field, for example, emailing patient records and other what they call PII, personally identifiable information or personal health information, is either discouraged or forbidden because of HIPAA compliance concerns. But on the fax side of things, and this is why in the healthcare field lots and lots of faxes are still being sent, this is all fine that you definitely need to use fax on it, but is that fax machine in a secure place? Okay, you don't know. And certainly in the legal field, this applies as well. You don't want confidential client documents sitting on a fax machine that may be in an open area of the office. Then you're pretty much babysitting, just like when you send a fax. Now, for receiving the fax, you're doing telephone calls. Did you send a fax? Yeah. Okay, don't send it yet. Give me a couple minutes to get to the fax machine, then send it. I'll wait there for it. Not the most efficient model. So that's just some of the problems and part of the reason why fax machines have this bad reputation. A couple other things, right? They're slow. If you've seen that paper pull through, and if you've got a 30-page brief that you're sending, that's going to take you some time. Get a big cup of coffee for that one. You have busy signals. They run out of paper. Papers jam. You have double feeds. And there's also this idea that when you have this fax machine, it's what we call a unitasker. It does one thing. It sends faxes, and it receives paper-based faxes. It doesn't do anything else. So again, let's go back to that question. Why are they still around? Well, there's a lot of good reasons. One, and this is kind of cultural, we still like paper. You know, when a transaction's in paper, it's real. We want that signature on that document. The other thing is it's fairly easy to use. There isn't a training manual really necessary for fax. If you know how to use a telephone, you know how to use a copy machine, you pretty much have the fax machine down. And yes, of course, they don't blue screen. Now, we don't have too many problems with our operating systems on our computers today with this, but there's still that issue that the fax machine, as long as there's a phone line, the fax machine is going to be up and running. Well, you know, those are all good reasons to keep the fax machine, but we've seen in technology that we've made this transition away from other antiquated technologies. You know, progress happens in the office environment, right? We've gone from things like, well, the phone, right? We all have office phones, and some of us still do. They may be VoIP-based phones now, but so many of us get by with either IP or with cell phones, mobile phone service. Okay, answering machines. They've been replaced by voicemail. I don't think many of us either have the tape-based or electronic dedicated machines. We're using the online voicemail systems. Typewriters, okay? I wrote term papers with a typewriter. I'm not afraid to admit that. But, oh, boy, when Word and WordPerfect and the processors came around. Using a word processor made life a lot easier. And even things like the internet, right? We remember the modems. We had dial-up modems. Now, of course, I'd hate to suggest to my daughters that they get 56K or something like that, and we once viewed that as really fast. Makes me sound old enough. Progress happens. New technologies are out there waiting to improve processes, like sharing important documents. So, while you may hate the fax machine or dislike the fax machine or even make fun of fax machine, you shouldn't do that with fax technology. The medium is not the problem here because, as I said, fax technology has a lot of good things about it. It's flexible. And what we're going to show you now is that you can fax from a computer. You can't email from a fax machine. Now, if that makes sense, what it gives you is two-way flexibility, whereas email can only be sent to other devices that accept email. And as I mentioned, security. When you think of faxing, it is a secure transmission. It's an analog transmission that doesn't have that problem of dealing with bugs and viruses and various other things that can plague email. That's why faxing is still relevant. So while the fax machine may be obsolete, faxing is not. And that's what we're really going to talk about here and give you a picture of. Hosted fax services in the cloud. So many business applications now have moved from devices. And at J2, we offer a lot of different services that take voicemail into the cloud, that take email processing in the cloud, that give you a virtual assistant in the cloud. What we're probably best known for is taking fax services into the cloud, and that presents a better solution. It gives you a lot more control on your side of document transmissions. It allows you to fax without using fax machines, without using fax servers, without having dedicated phone lines and other expenses. It allows you to fax entirely in the cloud. A lot of good things about this, and I don't think you should make a decision like this based solely on cost, but it certainly is less expensive than keeping a separate machine and also having a separate phone line. But when you start to eliminate some of these things like dedicated hardware, you see a lot of different advantages. We're going to show you the eFax application today, and much like the fax machine that doesn't need a lot of training, you can send and receive faxes from all different devices, from computers, from laptops, from tablets, from smartphones, and sending and receiving faxes is really a three-step process. Sending a fax, it's just like sending an email. You just change the address. The address of the fax is going to be the fax number, followed by the tag on at efaxsend.com. You attach all the documents that you want to fax, and then you click send. Okay? The faxes are going to be delivered, so anybody on that other end is going to see that just as if you sent that from a fax machine. It is an image-based transmission of a document. It gives you that audit trail, everything that the good parts of what you see in faxing with the convenience of email. You also have a three-step process here for receiving a fax. You're going to have a phone. Your fax number is going to be associated with your email or multiple email accounts. It's all up for you to set up. It'll arrive in your email, and it'll say you've got an eFax message. You simply click on that email attachment to open up your fax, and then you can store and archive your faxes from the online message storage. This is a system, the overall system, and it's not something you necessarily need to worry about or think about. It's just more for an informative part, so that when you think of this as the cloud, from any of those devices, as I said, you can send and receive documents. We use transport layer security, so those documents are secure and encrypted in transit. We offer a number of different services. So in addition to eFax, we also have eFax Secure, a little bit different type of service, so that instead of sending back when you're receiving emails, you're not going to get the fax as an attachment. Instead, you're going to get a message, and then you can go to log in with your password onto the eFax site, and then you can securely download those messages. So you have a lot of options. Some of the other nice things here is, yes, you can keep your existing fax number, or you can use a toll-free number, or you can choose from a local number. And as it says here, I think this number may be a little higher now, but 4,600 different cities. It's completely scalable, so that right now if you're going to have 5 or 6 fax lines and you want to add a few more, you're calling the phone company and you're adding in lines, you're buying equipment and things like that. With eFax, it's as simple as going online, clicking, and saying, I'd like another fax line. Lots of security tied to this, and then these are tied to our servers in the cloud, so that's where the service takes place. You have a lot more reliability on this. Okay, so that's really the message about eFax and what you get with hosted fax services. You get the best of both of these technologies. The best of fax, again, that audit trail. So did you send that document? Yes, you have a signed document, and I have an audit trail here. It is that confirmation that says the fax was sent, and it shows that it was received. You have the connectivity. So I can send emails, I can send to fax machines. I have as much connectivity as you can get. And then there's the regulatory compliance. If your industry happens to have regulatory needs that do with encryption and security of documents and data in transit and at rest, eFax can help you address that. And then you get some of the convenience that you have with email, that you don't need to have a paper. You don't have to print out a document and then fax it. Now, if you have a document in paper and you want to fax it, that's no problem either. You can use a multifunction device or a scanner and bring that document onto your PC, and you can fax from there. There's no waiting for that device. Anywhere you have internet connection, you can send a fax. There are no phone lines necessary for this, so it's faxing unplugged, if you will. Connectivity to all different devices, and as I mentioned, you have that portability. Wherever you have an internet connection, including your coffee shop, you can be faxing. Okay, so with that, I just wanted to give you a little bit of a preview of how you can fax using eFax, and it's a pretty straightforward process. Let's say, for example, I wanted to fax this document. This is a white paper that we wrote, Digital Documents Compliance in the Cloud. It's in my Word application here. Several different ways that I've described here of being able to send documents. In this case, when I'm in an office-type application here, it's just like printing. So instead of any of the office printers that I may have, I'm printing to eFax. And it's going to compile that document and pull up the eFax messenger and ask me where I want to send that document. So again, just as I described before with the email type environment, we can go ahead and say, send that fax to these contacts. If I want to view a fax, I'm sorry, I'm going to cancel that so we can take a look at that document. So that document's now in our eFax Messenger client. Now, you don't necessarily need to use this client. I like to use it myself because it gives you a bit of control on this. So now, just as I'm going to send this document, I can kind of control different things. So, for example, if this was the type of document I might want to sign, I can put my signature, digitized signature that I have on file in here. If I want to do any other sort of stamps on here, I can have either create a new one or go in and take one of these date times, different field-based stamps, and put that onto that as well. I can edit the image, different things like that. I can also take that document and do other attachments. So if I want to send a fax, I can send that to different people. So if I go here, you can see I have a basic fax cover sheet. And I can enter in let's see if I want to see. I can go to my directory here of different people. Let's see, I'll send this one to my brother-in-law. It fills in all of that information. I can take any document that I want to send to him. Let's see, I'm going to send him the lease on my Buick. Maybe he'll pay for it. And I take that as an attachment, put in my subject, and then hit send. Okay, so it's two different ways. One from an application like Microsoft Word. The other one actually from pulling up a fax and what we say is composing the fax with eFax. And you know, as I'm doing this demo, I realized I've been going on and prattling on about this. And I didn't share my desktop with you. So we're going to go back a little bit here, and I thank you for your patience with that. This is a new system that we're using, and I realized that I did not switch over to screen sharing with that. So I'm going to go back a little bit here, and we'll move fairly quickly. Hopefully now, with me rolling on here, you can now see the eFax messenger on this. And again, apologize for that snafu on this. This is the eFax messenger in here, and so if we can go back a little bit, here's how we can go in. And first, let's do some of the basics of viewing a fax. And so these may be different documents that I've had put in here. And I can open any of these. These are mainly cover pages, and that's how I can view that fax. I can also go in, and as I was describing to you, I'm going to close this one down, I described a white paper, and this is the actual white paper. You couldn't see it. To make up for that, we'll be happy to show it or to send it on to you. Digital documents in the cloud. So this is a white paper that we've written that gives you some information about some of the compliance issues that are associated with online documents, such as in eFax. We can go in there and we have control over this document. Now I can fax it directly from my Microsoft Word application, for example, where this originated in. But by pulling it into the eFax messenger, I can also go in here and put in different stamps here. So I can put in different fields into the cover page if I want. I can sign this, and as I was showing, or at least describing, and you can see, I can pull in a digitized signature stamp. I can go in and edit this document image-wise. I can remove pages, change the views and stuff like that. Then when I'm ready, I can always send on this fax. So I'm going to take note, save to that fax. So if I want to send a fax here, you can see it has a cover sheet. I should go back and give you that description here. I was showing you how I could easily send from my library. So just like in emails, we have attachments to different documents on here. I have a library of different people in my address book. So I can send this fax if I just want to send it to Octavio. I can also send it to, let's see, I can add in other people. I can even take a whole group of people, and you'll see all of them are going to get this. It's another nice benefit. So if you're using a fax machine today and you wanted to send a fax to 4 or 5 different people, certainly with email it's easy, right? You do the grouping. That's kind of the benefit with eFax. It's similar to that model where you can select from and add a group. I can take that fax cover page, and you'll see for each one of those people as it's sent, it's showing the first person that I selected, and that's what it's going to look like on the fax page. The subject will be the same, but the to and the fax number is going to change with each of their fields. Then I can customize this cover sheet. I take a document or multiple documents I may want to send, as I was mentioning, my Buick lease. I may also want to send this announcement. Those are going to be faxed, and they'll be sent as many pages as we need in here of the documents in the order that they're set. So I can grab those, change the order, and what have you. I can also view thumbnails of each of those if I like. And when I'm ready, all I have to do is hit the send fax on that. I won't, because my brother-in-law will wonder why I'm sending him my Buick lease. That's one of the ways to fax. I'll show you the other thing in the interfaces here is from emails. So here from my email account, I'm showing you these are the fax notices that you would get when you receive faxes. And so you can see here I've received a 6-page fax. Now this is the standard eFax corporate and not as I described with eFax Secure. eFax Secure would just give me a message that said you received a fax and would have a link to click through there. And if that's something you're interested in, let us know. We'll be happy to set up a demo and go into more details with you. And we'll certainly bring that up with another webinar that we have. So you can see in this message, it's going to tell me where I got the what number it came from, how many pages, and the caller ID on that. And then the fax itself is going to be this attachment. And this one happens to be an expense and travel form, which is always good. Okay. As I said, it's not the most complicated type of application. It's something that people can master fairly quickly. You have a lot of value with this application, and that meaning that your staff can start working with this and sending and receiving faxes fairly quickly, and it makes it fairly easy for them to get up and running, no matter what type of applications that they want to work with on this. Okay, and with that, I'm going to go back to the PowerPoint. We do have time for some questions as well, but I have a couple other things I wanted to show you and talk to you about. Okay. A couple things on what we now have is kind of your what you can do after this. We're going to send you a couple of things here. One is the slides from this presentation. So there's some information on there that you can glean. This will be a PDF file of those slides. We also have an article that was recently published on titled 2014 is this year you finally get rid of your fax machine. And then we also have a white paper that we'll make available for you that gives you some more of this information, but a bit more detail on this. Is cloud-based faxing right for you? And so with that, I want to say thank you. As I said, we left some time here, and we'll address your questions. If you'll bear with me a second, I'm going to open up the Q&A portion of here. And let's see, the first one is from Kathleen, and she would like to know, does the to link does the to, in quotes, link to Outlook contacts? And yes, it does. It can. It can be set to your Outlook contacts. It can be sent, and if you may have seen me spooling through my desktop, I also have it tied to my Yahoo.com address. So you can either choose to mix in those contacts or keep them separate. So for my personal contacts, I keep it in Yahoo email. I have Outlook for my business contacts, and you can create a third set. So yeah, those contacts can be that whole group within there. Josh had a question. Josh had a couple questions. I appreciate that, Josh. First, can the cover sheet be branded? Absolutely. What I showed you real briefly was just our standard, one of our standard cover sheets. You get, and somebody at eFax Corporate will correct me. I think you get about a half dozen standard ones. They're very easy to customize, so that's something that you can go in and add in your logos, anything else that you want to do. So yeah, you have the ability to completely customize those cover sheets. Fairly simple, straightforward process. And again, that's something that we can show you in a demo as well. Josh also asked, and I said he asked a couple questions on this. Can this service be used for the mass fax market? Absolutely. So we have multiple services with the eFax Corporate. I described, and what I showed you here is what we call the core of eFax Corporate for sending and receiving. There's an administrative module on this as well that allows you to add, remove different users, fax lines, and controls like that. I mentioned eFax Secure, which would allow you to have secure transmissions that allow you just to send the messages so that they're not email attachments. We also have something called eFax Developer, and that would allow you to, as you say, use the mass market fax. So if you wanted to do push-out faxes to thousands of people in a single broadcast, and it's typically what we call broadcast faxing, absolutely. The service can be used for that as well. So, Josh, thank you for that. I'm going to give one more, because Josh asked a lot of good questions. He asked, is this a U.S.-based service? And no, it is. It's certainly part of the service is based in the U.S. and our headquarters is in the United States. But the service is available in over 50 countries around the world, and we have localized numbers in all those countries. We have servers here in the U.S. We also have servers in Europe and around the world. That gives us a lot of redundancy of the service, right? It's one of the benefits of cloud-based faxing is you're not going to get that, our phone line's down, or I'm getting a business signal, I have to wait and wait and wait. Having the multiple servers. Now, there's certain restrictions that we have on those based on what our client needs are, where sometimes you don't want the documents to go to a server outside the country, and that's something we can accommodate as well. It's interesting. That high availability is really important, though. We have one client that we're doing a case study with. They're based on the East Coast, up in the Northeast, and they were hit hard by Hurricane Sandy, and they were using a fax server model for their faxing. And the legal service, of course, these documents are very, very important to them. They handle over 3,000 cases a year. Once that happened, they were down. I mean, they were out of their office, and they certainly had contingency plans on their computer network, so they were able to do that. The fax service wasn't. It was a fax server. It was hardware. It was phone lines. Happy to say they're a very happy client of eFax now, so that if there is some sort of natural disaster with the office, your fax service being in the cloud and on the J2 servers is preserved. So you're still able to do that faxing. Great. Let's see what other questions have here. Dimitri asked a good question. You know, and Dimitri's question reminds me that I led you with a story and then left out the process, the final part of that story. As you may be interested in, I did eventually buy a house in Las Vegas. So Dimitri asks, how can you have multiple people sign a document and fax it? Do I have to scan and I have to have a scanner and eFax? Could be, Dimitri. Let me explain the process and how we did that. We used eFax for this, so as we're sending these documents out. And that's one where I showed you a bit of the digitized signature. Now, there are different requirements, regulations on this. So sometimes you have to do, such as you applied, you have to do what we call a wet signature. So it needs to be pen to paper and sign that. In other cases, such as the offer on the home, it just needs to be, it can be a digitized signature. So in that case, we have the digitized signature for my wife, myself, and I introduced it to my real estate agent as well. So when we got those offers, we were able to put the stamped digitized images, as well as we had our initials on there with the different pages. It's an 8-page offer sheet. We're able to take that document, do the digitized signatures where we had to on the offer sheet, and then send that back to our agent. Now, she already had her information on there, the particulars of the property and the offer, and we were able to send that. So different ways you can go about that, Dimitri. I hope that addresses your question. The question from Britt, and I appreciate this one. Does eFax maintain a matrix of multifunction devices that are compatible with your service? Basically, Britt, any multifunction device that that can be tied to print drivers will work with ours. We also have a webinar tomorrow, and depending if you're viewing this live or in a recorded format, we have a webinar on incorporating multifunction devices, and I encourage you to go to our website and register for that, and it will show you how we can be agnostic to the device and still allow you to send and receive documents from that, because we have many customers who use multifunction devices for that. Okay, and let's see. Phyllis, you want to know, do you provide cheat sheet training documents for us to train end users? How do we go about checking on phone number portability? Two really good questions in one pass here, Phyllis, so I appreciate that. The cheat sheet, what I'll tell you is we have several things. We have some online resources, and I invite you to go to enterprise.efax.com. Diane asked a question on this next, what is the website, and asked that question. That is enterprise.efax.com, so I'll address both your questions. And we have some resources on there. We also have our YouTube channel. You can get at it from enterprise.efax.com, or you can also go to enterprise.efax corporate, on YouTube, and you'll see we have some videos on there that show you how to do this. So you can either use those as documents as well as in that mode. For the second part, on checking on phone number portability, if you see on the screen I have that 888 number for you, Phyllis. When you call into that, our team can certainly help you with that process to talk to you through both on phone number portability as well as the availability of new numbers and what you want to have there. And I hope, Diane, that answers your secondary question on that is, can I keep my present company's fax numbers? Absolutely you can, and that's a process of provisioning. It's really easy to do. It's if I can give you a parallel, as we know the iPhone 6 was recently released, and a lot of people are switching over to different service providers and things like that. It's very much akin to that, is that portability that you have with that. Gary wanted to know, is there additional fee to retain our old fax numbers? There isn't from eFax. No, Gary. We don't charge you any additional fee to retain your existing fax number. We want you as a customer on there. And as I said, not to totally defer, but we got some really smart people on that line, and they can walk you through that whole process and help you out with that on the provisioning for keeping your old phone line. It's fairly straightforward, just as it is with your mobile devices. So great questions, everybody. I really appreciate that. And I appreciate you bearing with me as I was doing my voice-only demonstration. Hopefully, though, that the demonstration gave you a picture of how this works. Really appreciate all of your joining us today. Great questions, great interaction. You'll receive a copy of the slides, a recorded version of this webinar. If we can edit out my voice-only demo, that would be great and save me a little embarrassment, but it may be just in its entirety. If you have additional questions, again, I encourage you to give a call to that 888 number that we have on the screen, and you'll also be getting a copy of that white paper and a link to that article as well. Thank you so much for joining us, and have a great day.